need some research.
It smokes, it drinks, it philosophizes.
Just let me suck, please. Just a little suck on each one.
My mouth's bleeding, Bert! My mouth's bleeding!
Shall we talk now or wait?
Ugh, my face. Just saw it.
I still wish we just did audio with this shit. I understand why we did camera, but
like no wonder I'm so monotone and shit. Because when you get expressive, you make faces, and then my face is just monstrous.
It's embarrassing.
It's better to just be stoically ugly than like expressively ugly and shit. What the fuck is the Cinephiliacs? I guess we used to have Holy Clown Cinephiliacs where we do this long 3-hour fucking rambling movie reviews. Then we switched to the Hard Out format, but we're bringing back Cinephiliacs to Hard Out. Still, I was thinking again last night if we should do double features within an hour or not. It might be better. We'll see how this goes. If
to
we
talk
have an
about
hour
an
worth of
entire
shit.
movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But as we said, sometimes that'll just springboard us into other topics related to it and stuff. So we'll see. Yeah.
Well, my pick for next week. I don't know if we're gonna have an hour worth of shit to talk about it. Maybe.
What was your pick next week? I forgot. Oh, yeah.
Mission. Might end up talking imperialism and shit, but it's like how fun is all that,
Yeah.
So, but mashing it up with your pick would be fucking amazing,
Right.
which I don't even want to reveal.
Oh, sorry.
That's all good.
It's funny. It's like
it is.
Yeah.
It is. So the Mission and Party Monster. That shit sounds amazing to me.
In the event that we didn't mash them together, at least we're talking about it now, so it gets its due. But
that just sounds way crazier and more fun to me than a whole hour on the Mission.
Me too. Yeah. Well, it's all an experiment, man. We'll just keep.
But this one is just going to be a solo one. There's no double feature here. And this week we are talking about The Death of Stalin, which was your pick.
Yeah, from the Cinephiliacs run. We alternated picks, and this was my last pick then, which is why I'm sticking with it now, just for the continuity's sake. And it is a good movie.
It's fucking awesome.
I don't know what you thought. Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing, dude.
Yes.
Amazing.
I love
what's
that.
The dude's name, Armando Iannucci or something?
Yeah,
Iannucci.
The guy behind Veep. I'm pretty sure he created Veep.
In the
Loop. Definitely a writer on it.
In the Loop.
I don't know that one. Oh, that's a DC type thing, right? Too, or no? Am I? What is that? In the Loop?
It's another political kind of thing. It's got Gandolfini and.
I've never seen it. Man, that's another.
I saw it once. I don't remember it well, but I remember thinking it was fucking great. Just smart. It's so refreshing to have a film by people who are intelligent as fuck who made it.
Yes, yeah. It's sort of in the approaching like Sorkin or Mamet or something, but more like comedic and bungling and shit, which almost makes it better in some ways. I mean, I won't say better, but just
more
entertaining.
I don't know if I would want to watch the morose, serious version of this.
Right, exactly.
Power struggle.
But yeah, this kind of shit, the bickering, power, like you said, struggle, the cynical nature of it, like that show Succession is sort of like that too.
Yes.
Where that stuff, I love it. It fascinates me, just this infighting and
that black comedy is almost essential to it too.
Yes. Otherwise, it would be too. I don't know, just
morose, just gross, and just almost messagey. Like, for people who don't know, The Death of Stalin is about literally the death of Stalin and then the power vacuum and all the fucking assholes scrambling to fill that power vacuum. But one of the cool things about it is they don't do any of that enemy at the gates accent bullshit. They don't give a fuck about the accent or making Russian actors or any of that, which is hilarious in this era of representation. I guess nationality and shit doesn't matter. But so it's like Steve Buscemi is Khrushchev, which is fucking what? Jeffrey Tambor is Molotov, right? Or no, not Molotov.
Malenkov.
Yes, Malenkov. Molotov is Michael Palin, which is fucking amazing too.
Yes.
The
cast in this was so good,
dude.
Beale, what's his name? The guy who played Beria.
Oh my god.
Simon Russell Beale.
Oh, and Jesus Christ. Rupert Friend as Stalin. Hilarious.
Yes.
So good.
The black comedy, with the accents, I wanted to comment on that accents. I was thinking about that watching it again last night because I had seen it once before. And that occurred to me then too. And there was something else I had seen recently. I can't remember what that had that discussion about it's set in this area, but it's all people with British accents and shit. But it's, you know, it's in
Well, like every
Russia, whatever.
Greek, Roman, gladiator,
exactly.
all of those do that.
Right. Good
and then
example.
You got like Prince of Thieves, where Kevin Costner just didn't give a shit. But then you have like Christian Slater doing some weak ass British sort of accent while Costner doesn't care. It's just hilarious.
My thoughts on that is, like, especially with respect to Death of Stalin, is it's better that the actor communicate the mannerisms and the inflections and things more than the accent or any, because it's not like, even in Russia, they're not speaking in English with Russian accents, you know. They're speaking in Russian. So like, even English with a Russian affect is almost off-putting in a way. It's kind of better just to be, you know, inhabit the character and use whatever, you know, dialect you have, than to possibly do a less convincing version because you're trying to do this accent.
Exactly. Know? And it's like a play where if they put on some Shakespeare production in Russia, they're not going to be doing fucking English accents and shit in it. They're going to do it in Russian,
right?
Or even if in English, not translated, in their own accents, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of plays, this very much, I looked it up thinking it would be adapted from a play. It's actually adapted from a French graphic novel.
Yeah, I didn't realize that till
amazing
last night too.
It said a 2010 and 2012 graphic novel in Wikipedia, so I guess maybe it's a 2-part thing or some shit. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah,
weird.
I saw that too.
Or maybe there's 2 editions of it. I don't know.
I love it.
I would love to get my hands on it, though.
With the subject, though. Yeah.
Yes, I would love to see what the art looks like, what the, you know, but it felt like this would make an amazing play.
Yes.
And we talk a lot on this show and on previous incarnations of this show about the difference between stage and film, but how we don't think they have to be as separate as people think they are. Like, films don't have to be super visual. You can very easily just shoot a fucking play and it's awesome, you know? But this just felt so dialogue driven, but almost slapstick at times, like a noise is off kind of thing, which is a filming of a play. You could almost film a filming of a play, Birdman, that kind of shit, you know, of this.
Yes.
Be amazing.
Right from the beginning of the film, you know, where the orchestra's playing the piece, and they, you know, Stalin calls, and well, they call him and the, you know, the person running the operation there, and to call back in 17 minutes or whatever the fuck it was. And like, they weren't even sure how long, you know, it's been since they started figuring out what 17 minutes was from that point, and how that meant your life or death, you know, if you called at the wrong time. That everyone's so paranoid that
it's amazingly effective because it works like a sitcom, but the stakes are death.
Yes, right.
It's not like wife's gonna be mad or some shit if I don't call at the right time, you know. It's like death, but it uses comedy to sell that ultimate fear that everybody has, and the lengths they'll go to not fall foul of this fucking dictator who at a whim could just have you killed and shit. Like
there's a great scene where Molotov, who himself was like the whole behind the background or the setup of the film before Stalin's death is introduced, is that there's a sort of a cleansing happening. They have a list. It's mostly doctors, ironically, when Stalin needs one the most, and they've killed off all these intellectuals and stuff, or they were in the process of doing that. So they
burned them in the gulags and shit.
Yes. And Molotov was on that list, and they all like were hanging out and laughing and stuff, and like, good night. And, you know, Barry, as Molotov's walking off, is like, a good night, you sweet, you know, bastard or whatever. And you poor, you know, because he's doomed, because he's on the list, you know, and he's going to
Barry knows he's like the right hand guy, basically.
Yeah. And I was always fascinated with Barry, by the way, in history in general. So it was interesting because he's just such a monster.
Yeah, we can dig into some of this Russian history, which you're more well versed on than I am, but.
And Molotov later in the film, though, where I was going to go with that, of the lengths people will go to and everything. So he ends up getting spared because of Stalin's death. So they decide to put a moratorium on the killings and things for a moment while they deal with it. And Molotov is brought back into the fold, but it also had been revealed that I think it was his wife was imprisoned by Stalin, or even possibly executed. He didn't know, for treachery, you know, treason, or, you know, something.
What's hilarious because he assumes she's been killed. So they're all talking about she was such a traitor. He's even saying his own wife.
That's where I'm going
traitor.
with this. Yeah. And Barry actually had her secreted away, maybe for future use or whatever, like a moment like this, and he was bringing her back to Molotov. And meanwhile, Molotov and Khrushchev's, played by Steve Buscemi, are they're meeting up and, you know, trying to figure out their schemes and stuff. And Molotov is like throwing his ex-wife under the bus, saying, yeah, she was a fucking traitor, she deserved it, because he's trying to keep himself in their good graces. But as they're having this discussion, Beria brings his wife up and shows up with her, but she's outside the door frame at first because it's supposed to be a surprise, and there's shit talking her the entire time how she deserved it and shit, and then and then as soon as she walks in, they're like in mid-sentence go,
I miss you,
but it was like it was all trumped up, it was bullshit,
comedic timing, impeccable. The thing is, though, I was thinking with that, she can't even be mad because in that environment,
right, and
everyone has to give everyone else the benefit of the doubt that you're saying whatever you have to say to not get your ass killed.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, you kind of.
So it's like, baby, I didn't mean it. I was just trying not to get fucking killed too.
Oh man, but just the little quips and things, just the behind people's backs comments throughout the whole thing, it's just fucking just constant.
Felt like it was real people because they would throw in dumb shit like Andrea Riseborough or whatever her name is. Andrea, I don't know how you pronounce her name either. Awesome actress. She was in Birdman, speaking of it.
Svetlana, Stalin's daughter.
Like she's sitting there talking at one point by the bed that he was in where he died, I think, right? The hospital bed. And she's just like, why? Who puts a lamp on a chair? Just dumb shit.
Yes, because she's like grieving and focused on some weird thing.
But it's like, as a writer, those are the things you don't think to do. Like, oh, you put that character in a real place and time where they look away and they comment on something in the room or whatever. And it makes it just feel so much more real, even though it's absurd as fuck, everything that's happening.
That specific moment, I wondered if it was improv, like it was actually, and she actually was wondering that herself.
There's a few of those.
But I could see it being scripted because I do have that confidence in Iannucci.
Yeah, like when the composer fell and hit his head in Paddy Considine or Considine. I need to start looking up name pronunciation shit. Amazing Irish actor. See In America if you've never seen it. He's the guy at the very beginning who's scared he's going to be killed because he didn't record the concert, so he's scrambling to get this whole concert put back on again immediately. It's like he's holding the audience hostage as they're trying to leave and shit, and making the orchestra play a second time just so he can record it for Stalin and everything.
Yes, and the pianist refused to play because her family and friends have been killed. She's a babe too, Olga Kurylenko. She was a Bond girl, so says it all.
Quantum of Solace, I think. So the composer like faints because this shit's just so crazy, and again, everyone's exasperated. Death and life and death is on the line and shit. And he faints and he falls and hits his head like on this like trash bucket or something that was attached to the wall. And constantly just like, who put that there?
Yeah, it was a fire extinguisher sort of something like. He was like, who? Yeah, like. He fell and hit his head on it, but he was blaming it because he's just looking for something to blame, Yeah, it's hilarious.
And everyone's just pissed and on edge and fucking. That's what's so great about it. It really, even though it's funny as fuck, every second of its runtime almost, it really sells what that impression is like, where everyone's on edge and just scared to say the right thing and the wrong thing.
And there are a lot broader things to talk about when it comes to that. Like the one of the biggest problems the world faces constantly is a political figure rising to too much power, one individual and those direct under him like Beria and stuff. But I'm speaking to Stalin, and today you have Putin and even Trump. Like some people would like to see Trump installed in that kind of level of power. Like I wouldn't want to get behind any leader that much. I think it's unsafe to do that. You need to always temper it with some skepticism about their motives, and just like not even that, even if their motives are good, you just don't want to give too much power to any one individual. That this kind of shit is what will ultimately happen.
Right. You can't set up a system in which like, oh, we're going to give this guy this power because we like him and trust him, but the next guy who comes along gets the same power now,
which is what happened with Lenin and Stalin. Right.
Exactly.
And
even
Lenin,
this in families, even like we dealt with some of that. Mom's boyfriends and stepdads, that authoritarian bullshit where you're just on edge and on eggshells all the time about saying and doing the wrong thing and shit, and feeling watched and oppressed, essentially. It's fucking no way to live, dude.
And this is a good opportunity to talk about what's going on in Russia now. Like at the moment, Navalny, he was poisoned, and of course it's assumed that it was by Putin's people, Navalny being a huge critic of, and I've only read his name, I'm assuming that's how it's pronounced, but he, while away, he was, I think in England or somewhere in Europe, he was poisoned and barely made it. And then he went back to Russia just like a week or two ago, and knowing that he'd probably be arrested and put in jail, which is what happened. But he was prepared, and he has a group of people who are leaking anti-Putin like a 2-hour documentary on him on YouTube, and the identity of Putin's 17-year-old Instagramming daughter, love child, and Putin's estate that's like a mini kingdom, just this super opulent, multi-billion-dollar, I think it is, estate. And he's doing this all from prison, and they can't touch him because there's this whole, the public is actually rebelling a bit against Putin, so he can't just like off him that easily now. Is a crazy like chess match. You know? Yeah. Russia is fascinating, dude.
Yeah, no, I'm always amazed by these situations where somebody doesn't just assassinate these motherfuckers.
A Putin, you mean? Yeah, like someone in their group,
Stalin,
or something,
Hitler,
like some kitchen cook. Yeah, exactly. No, I know what you mean. Yeah, Saddam, all these guys. Like, there's not one person. Caligula, you know, he's like raping people's wives and shit. Not one of those husbands just fucking took a chance to, you know,
just
grab a knife at the kitchen table and just fucking slash his throat or whatever. Fear, dude, it just like puts a fucking stamp on your will, it seems, you know.
Well, that's
like even the Jews who were lined up and stuff, like none of them fighting back and everything. You probably get paralyzed, you know.
Right, and there were some, but they get snuffed out so quickly, and then you're scared by seeing that example made and shit.
And it's attrition of hope, you know, like by the time you're at the edge of the pit, you've already been oppressed so much, and you've seen it happen enough to where you just like, I know it's useless to fight.
Which is so fucking sad.
But yeah, Russia, I was going to say their entire history, like of the, like America, you know, obviously, like it seems like many Americans see America as being like the center of the world, you know, but when you look at the entire course of history, Russia, if you go far back enough, you have like the Mongols, you know, took over Moscow for a period. And you have, even in World War II, Russia was kind of the main protagonist, you know. They early on, you know, they made a truce with Germany, which Germany broke and attacked Russia stupidly, probably Hitler's biggest blunder. And Russia was also fighting the Japanese, and there are some who say that the bombs weren't really what ended the war. It was the fighting with Russia that Japan thought they couldn't sustain.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's just such a huge landmass with so many fucking people. It's like you said, and it wasn't it in Princess Bride? Never go to war or enter a land war in fucking Asia or some shit.
Yes, right.
Basically, because like China and Russia, they just keep throwing people at you, dude. It's a meat grinder, and it's fucking crazy how they essentially devalue life, which is something I thought about in this film. How we talk all the time with this shit about ego and the role ego plays in almost everything we do. And it's interesting that you live in this system that seems to not value life at all, to the point where people are so threatened that they value their own existence so much that it makes them devalue everyone else's. You know what I mean? Like they're willing to sell everyone else out to survive and shit, you know?
Yeah, mindset, right.
Right, just crazy.
And really, my position, my philosophy personally is the exact opposite, that the human life and the human side is really the most important thing over state, over anything. You know what I mean? And that's the problem a lot of these societies fall into. They put the state above themselves, and I think that's dangerous.
Absolutely. And I get the libertarian mindset as far as fuck government and all that because of that, but doesn't mean you can't have order and, you know, regulation and shit that benefits the average person the most, you know.
Yeah, like my ideals are very libertarian. It's like, do what you want, like the government shouldn't intervene. I think the government primarily should be there to stop people from victimizing each other, especially like murder and rape and shit. That's obvious, right? But also at certain other levels of like exploiting people to too much degree. But it shouldn't legislate morality, you know, the state.
Right, and there's the idea just that human nature is so nasty, though, that it's like, yeah, let people alone and let them do what they're going to do, but they're going to do nasty shit. So we need laws and rules and a system.
Right, and when a victim results from that, then that's when the government needs to be involved. Exactly, and defend our country. That libertarians generally agree we need a military and stuff. Otherwise, you're just going to get trampled by some other foreign.
I'm always surprised by how much libertarians are okay with rich powered interests having the liberty to trash the environment that all of us share. That's one thing about libertarians. I wish there were more environmentalist libertarians who are like,
and what's funny
this
is
shit
because
belongs
many
to
of them,
all of us.
And many of them are sort of outdoorsman types and stuff. So
Right.
there's this
But
weird
they're all
dichotomy
about
there.
fences. It's the Clive and Bundy ranch. This is my land and that's your land. And it's very weird. It's very much about ownership and not at all socialistic, but really public lands. Like they don't even necessarily believe in public lands. It's like sell off everything to oil and shit. It's gross, dude.
Yeah, because that's that guy TJ from Deep Fat Fried. That guy TJ from Deep Fat Fried was talking about libertarian because when he went on the internet originally, he was a libertarian, and he's changed now. And he basically said, you know, when I realized that all you end up doing is replacing the government with the emperor of Amazon and Jeff Bezos being the emperor, you know, that's where it's headed if you just allow corporations.
And even less accountability.
Right. So to me, I'm pro-capitalist, the economy, the capitalist economy. But I'm also pro-union. I think they're perfect counterbalances. It seems like people are all one way or the other, you know. But
it's crazy to me.
Like
you don't
you're not going to
the role they both play and how we both are vital, but it's a struggle for balance.
You need capitalism if you want people to do the jobs that no one's going to want to do if it weren't because they need an income, like slaughterhouses and shit. Like who's going to ever do that if you're
capitalism has several benefits.
Yes,
that's one of them.
You know, genius is rewarded because you create great products and
innovation,
have all the technology we have, et cetera. If it were like some 1984 government runs everything, they decide what we work and what we don't, it would be a mess.
It is cool to be able to get rich.
Yeah,
to go
so
rags to riches.
Capitalism's beautiful, but it needs to be checked. That's all. It's just that I think most people, even like when we talked to Colby, he said you need to have antitrust laws and things. So it's like, okay, so we all agree there needs to be some degree of government interference with just letting shit just go fuck it, like the free hands is just, you know, like
the thing is so many of those Colby types and shit are so against any kind of equitable wealth distribution, which if anything, this coronavirus shit has illustrated that we need it more than ever.
Yeah.
If we had baked into our system a UBI,
right,
everything would be fine. All the small businesses, everything would be fine and afloat. And here's another thing. How about instead of the government always bailing out big business during this time, and we're so worried about small businesses and you get the Joe Rogans and shit, that's their whole thing is small businesses. How about big business bails out small business? There's your antitrust thing. Make Amazon pay to keep your mom and pop alive.
Yeah. You tax the big businesses to support the small bit. You funnel it. Yes.
And it's all business. It's business keeping business alive. You're not taking from taxpayers to make and people could say cost will go up, but research has shown that shit's minimal because it's all diffused. It's fractions of pennies every time. And you know.
And with the currency being fiat as it is, it's all going to stabilize itself. Like the value of, say, a house is dictated by, like, to say it's $400,000, a dollar is just where a dollar landed because the economy is such that it costs X dollars to build a house. There's this much demand. There's this much supply. People make a certain amount of income, but it's all variable to different degrees.
Right.
You know?
And then the profit margin that's where like bidding comes in, where profit margin is variable depending on supply, demand, et cetera, you know, but that's where you can take it from. Amazon, these companies have made billions. Profits. They've done better during this fucking pandemic. So sap that shit from them.
Exactly.
And here's another thing.
And then you can end income tax.
Yes. Look at corporate personhood, though. These companies and corporations get to say they're people. Well, what happened to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Apply that to those motherfuckers. Apply the same standard that we.
That's a great quote, but I've always thought about, you know, I'm like, it kind of.
I think it means your fellow man is the way to say it.
To help your community, et cetera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To help your neighbor.
I mean, ultimately, my preferred outcome, you know, because here's the thing we talk about, for example, like my saying capitalism, capitalism is great because no one would want to fucking cut hair and you know, work like again at even what's considered or was at the time considered a decent job, like building automobiles in a factory. No one's going to want to do any of that if it's not because they get a paycheck, right? Obviously.
Right.
But eventually we're going to get to a point where most of that's automated and there won't be any jobs doing that.
Right.
So
And we're already at a point, if it's not automated, there's people in other countries who will do it cheaper, and it's cheaper to ship than to pay people here, which broke the unions essentially. But
yeah, I always thought that we should have just, as the perfect solution, rather than just outright like tariffing or saying you can't import from this country, whatever, is to just simply say that any product sold in the U.S., the factory at which it was created has to have these minimum conditions.
Right.
Minimum wage, the U.S. minimum wage, U.S. OSHA.
But they don't want that.
I know, but I'm just saying
that's
that would be
we,
the perfect
people,
way.
would have to somehow make happen through taking over Congress and
no one's going to go to the street to demonstrate for the rights of foreign workers, you know.
Because essentially, I think what you're doing is right. What you're saying is the perfect hack, because what needs to happen essentially is workers the world over need to unionize together. Chinese workers and American workers have the same
That's what
standards
communism
we demand
is, essentially.
And shit. Exactly. Well, hey man, you know, Stalinism is not socialism, you know.
Exactly.
So
I think, well, the essence
but what you're saying is like a hack, though.
Labor movement.
Knowing that's never going to happen.
Exactly.
The easiest thing to do is take over the mechanism of regulation.
Yes.
And then regulate equitable shit. But ultimate power corrupts ultimate.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The people who are in power don't want that. They want to keep
and even people who get into power for altruistic reasons are corrupted by it and shit a lot of times too. Like all these people, who knows when Nancy Pelosi and shit or fucking Mitch McConnell got into office, if they really were idealists and eventually just became these political animals and shit and millionaires, you know?
Yeah, I think that's often the case. I think many people who start in politics, they're idealistic. They're going to demonstrations. They believe in the spirit of what they're saying and everything.
It's
but
like throwing some Christian virgin who was saving himself for marriage in a strip club or some shit. Like,
right.
What do you
yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Good luck with those ideals and discipline and shit, especially when everyone around you is doing it. Tulsi Gabbard was just on Rogan again, talking about literal deals where Democrats would come to her and say, look, this is how you need to vote, because if you don't vote otherwise, it's going to look good for Donald Trump. Shit like the stimulus checks, right?
Yeah.
So we can't let Trump get this big stimulus win, not before the election.
Which is bullshit.
It's like you're fucking the people.
Yep.
That's the problem with the Democratic
Party. It's reminiscent of Christie. What's his name? Richard Christie?
Corpus Christi from Newport
No,
News?
Chris. Is it Chris? That's where my mind went. Chris Christie? Is that his name? Shit. Christie. The shutdown of the bridge.
Yes.
You know? And supposedly, like it's like the mob. He's removed enough from it that you can't lay it on him, but his staff essentially shut down a bridge, a public bridge between like New Jersey and New York or something like that, to punish the local government there for going against them on something,
which is insane.
And the people who end up suffering are the commuters and anyone who might have needed emergency services, you know, which is awful.
People are pawns all the time.
That's just fucking unacceptable.
It's pathetic, honestly, but it's like, how do you rest?
I know.
If it's almost like you just got to find some way to diffuse power, which is the libertarian thing, I guess. Just topple the government, then there are no opportunities for corruption. But it doesn't work. What's a better mechanism? That's my problem with the libertarian movement. Is never has offered to me a better solution, because just the Wild West doesn't sound like a better solution than what we have, honestly. To me,
I think, ironically, I feel like
robber barons
in our heart of hearts, almost everyone has the same answer, and they just latch on to these other narratives and shit. But if you lay it out point by point, you say, you know, you can't give government too much power, you can't give corporations or any individual too much power. It's all about power, and therefore the only way to solve that is by having a government that has the authority to regulate power, right? I mean, that's the only
which is what we have. But then it's just make it as transparent as possible.
Exactly, you have to design it in such a way that it can't be abused. It's immune to you know, and transparency is probably number one. You know, the number one way to accomplish that.
This is how the deep state rolls into it, which kind of brings you back to the death of Stalin type shit too. Is that people say, all right, so another reason I like Tulsi, and all of you Russian agent people can suck my dick. I don't care who the fuck you are. Even if I love you and I'm related to you, you're fucking dumb about this.
Ironically, a lot of the same, well, no, I won't say it's the same people, but you have the whole Russiagate thing too with Trump that may have been.
Oh yeah, it's it's tied up together. Russiagate is overblown too, in my opinion.
Well, I just mean in that, like, many of the people who criticize Tulsi, I think, are actually liberals who.
Yeah, exactly. The right loves her.
They are behind, you know, the Russiagate sort of movement as well. Yeah.
Libertarians and should love her, you know. Even some conservatives love her because for one reason she's willing to go on Fox and talk to people because she, as she says, you make peace with enemies, not fucking with friends, you know.
Right.
You got to talk to the people you disagree with and go again. If you want to be president, you want to be president of America, not the 78 million that voted for you. So you do got to fucking reach out to everyone and appeal to everyone. Well, her thing about the regime change wars, so much of this shit is about the military congressional industrial complex, which as soon as you say that, I know neoliberal types, and man, I'm sounding like Ryan Jackson and shit now, even using these terms, but I know a lot of people on the left who like immediately think you're talking like deep state, which leads to QAnon, which leads, you know, all this crazy shit. Like I've had people even say, as soon as someone says the military industrial complex, I tune out. Like, damn, are you kidding me?
No, that's real.
That's the real issue. No question. Jack London, the Iron Heel, called it 100 fucking years ago.
I just saw a meme recently that was like,
damn, sorry.
All I remember about it specifically is how it talked about how we will like spend millions on a Predator drone that drops missiles or bombs that cost 78,000 each or something. And like when you think about that, like we're applying that degree of expense to do what in Afghanistan and shit. You know what I'm saying?
What could you do with that money?
To just bomb like tribal, you know, people.
We can't afford UBI or healthcare.
And it's purely because, I mean, the main thing that you take it all the way back is jobs. People would say, oh, you know, the military industrial complex, that's our current
even Bernie,
basically.
Bernie opponents will critique him on how the F-22 Raptors were built in Vermont. They had some huge contract to build Raptors, which was a whole fucking clusterfuck and money sink, you know. Here's the point. What I was getting at initially, though, with even invoking Tulsi and foreign policy, is that foreign policy dictates that you need to run these reindeer games, which is CIA type shit, clandestine operations, whatever. That's the enemy of transparency. That's what they use to keep all this shit secret, which then creates this shroud over everything, which then allows all this fuckery to take place. So you almost just have to be principled and say, we're not going to have these regime change wars and have this kind of clandestine foreign policy shit just so we have transparency on our own shit at home.
Exactly. Completely agree. Because like the WikiLeaks is a great way to you know, shed light on all that. Like what happened with WikiLeaks? Julian Assange was given a bunch of information by like people, you know, I forget his name, the cadet who
Chelsea Manning.
People like that, right? But what did Chelsea Manning give WikiLeaks?
Real
information
shit.
about
damning information,
abuses of power, essentially.
Exactly.
But there is a flip side to that too, though. Like WikiLeaks, I believe it was WikiLeaks published the information on operatives within Turkey who were anti-government operatives, and was their addresses and shit like that. So it's all gray. It's all on a spectrum, because I'm all for. I think the difference is government versus individual. You know, like with WikiLeaks, for example, the government, it's their. It's at least in the current paradigm, which I don't actually agree with or like, but it's their responsibility to protect their secrets. To punish someone else for publishing secrets that they let leak, however it happened, is fucked up. To punish Assange for publishing your secrets because you couldn't contain them, you know.
Part of the thing with that is one of the critiques against him, and it goes back to the charge of treason, which is punishable by death.
I have a whole
that you could
thing
cost
on that too.
Right. That you could cost lives. But that's acting as if the other system isn't chewing up lives all day.
Right.
Like what was Chelsea Manning releasing was some shit of lives being cost and shit, right?
To our whole ultimate point, though, if we didn't have operatives in Turkey, you know, who were, I mean, you know, or weren't even fucking with that shit, then we wouldn't have anything to be embarrassed about or to risk people's lives because we're not participating. That's Tulsi's point. You know, we shouldn't even be fucking mired in that bullshit. We should just, yes, have a robust defense, guns pointed outside our borders. Anyone fucking flies in or fucks with us, they get fucking shot down.
Totally done for.
If someone's trying to fuck with our infrastructure, you know, we protect yourself. That's all. You don't have to go change regimes. You don't have to change the world. Protect yourself.
I think what changed a lot of
Be a
this was
shining
nukes.
example.
It's the paranoia that nukes produce, that we got to stop these other fuckers from getting the bomb because they want, somebody will use one on us one day.
That
It
is
don't matter how many guns you have pointing at the sky.
Yep. With,
you're not going to stop the
North
nukes.
Korea, etc. Fucking Pakistan has nukes.
Right. And everyone talks about how many nukes do you need? We have more than you need. That's because some will be intercepted. You need to launch 100 nukes, so when 50 of them get caught by weapon systems and shit,
you know,
the rest go through. You know,
the whole Reagan Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
That's a whole interesting conversation because, and this has to do with Russia, which somewhat ties into our fucking movie review of the death of Stalin, which is hilarious that this still is that. But that I believe it was Gorbachev at the time, right, who didn't want Reagan to have to introduce Star Wars, which Star Wars was a protection sort of like satellites and you know, NATO sites that would be able to shoot down.
It's missile interception.
It's prevention
systems.
Right. So that's an interesting philosophical discussion because it's like, wait, so you are against the idea of us protecting ourselves from being nuclear bombed, but the reason for that is some argue that nukes are good because it's mutually assured destruction, and therefore you end up with sort of a stalemate where no one even starts two big wars because they'll get nuked. They'll end up with Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah, the problem is then you need to give every country a nuke because then we have proxy wars and we destroy other countries over this shit.
Yes, but I mean, as awful as that, I don't think we should do proxy wars, but if you compare it to before we had nukes with World War II, like 60 million or whatever died, you know, the mutually assured destruction, like if you give it to every country though, that you have a higher potential of, you know, rogue.
You know what? I'm going to give Trump some props,
leaders.
Which, you know, is not my style. His whole Kushner, even I'll give props. As much of a weaselly little piece of shit as he seems to be, I don't know the guy. I can't speak to his character, but I mean, from what I see, he should be in Succession or something, right?
Yes, yeah, it came to mind too when you mentioned
so his whole plan, though, for peace in the Middle East was to just get them all doing business together. Yes. I don't think that's wrong.
Yes.
I think people won't need nukes if we're all in business together. And if you kill me, your business suffers.
Exactly.
We need to tie it all up. So globalism, in a sense, makes sense. But Trump is then funny. It's anti-globalist a lot of times. It's
right.
It's all it's a mixed message is the problem, you know?
Yeah. Well, their system that they seem to want to run with, and maybe it's because we're in our current situation, you know, but the idea would be that nations compete with each other and ally with each other on economic terms. That is definitely better than on warlike terms, you know, than the way our differences resolved, for example, in World War II and World War I, which is really all one big war in the end.
Right.
It's better. I mean, even if people are exploited and oppressed, at least it's because like the whole reason that capitalism, like even the exploitation works is because it's taking people out of extreme complete poverty. They're gravitating toward $1 to $2 jobs in shitty conditions because it's still an improvement for them. That's what's interesting about it.
Yeah, that's what's sad, and that's one of the arguments a lot of pro-business right wingers and shit use is that capitalism is lifting more people out of poverty than socialism ever has or could. You know, and it's not,
and it's all
untrue in that sense.
It's subjective. It's subjective. Like what are you owed out of life is the question. You know what I mean? So like, let's say you are in some remote village somewhere and there's a drought and there's no farming to be done and you're just starving. And then you could go work in this factory for a couple of dollars an hour, which is complete shit to us. But to them, they can send money back home and they're keeping their family food on the table and all that kind of stuff. It's very complex and subjective, you know, like, ideally, my preference is that everyone have a certain standard of living that's better than that, like, obviously, but the reality of the world, it's like incremental, you know, over time, we're progressing to a point where eventually everyone hopefully will have better standards of living, but we're in this weird transitory phase right now.
Right. Part of it is that whole argument of incremental progress. First, we want it and we want it now, which I totally understand. It's really hard for like marginalized people to sit there and look. And this is kind of goes to Black Lives Matter and shit, where we're sick of white Democratic Democrats saying, we're going to get there. It's incremental. They're like, fuck that. We want equality now. We want justice now, you know, which I get. But it leads to upheavals and then sometimes more victimhood and shit, depending on, you know, just the combativeness of it. I'm not talking about Black Lives Matter specifically. I'm talking just movement, people's movements. You know what I mean? Revolution.
Well, the reason we even work 8-hour work days, there was bloodshed and, you know, Haymarket riots and such, you know, so.
And not even in fighting, but like the shirtwaist fires and just bad work standards and, you know.
And of course, I mean, you know, this is back to the fighting side, but the Pinkertons, et cetera, you know, were oppressing people who were trying to get better conditions for themselves. I mean, it did require, that's the problem with our condition is like the French Revolution, et cetera, it requires blood to change things. But it has required, I'll say, through history.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, can we start at least exploring ways to change things, get transparency, et cetera, without bloodshed?
We have seen how coming at problems in a thoughtful, procedural way accomplishes things. Most, even in the capitalist corporate world, most ones who succeed do so because they put thought into their business plan. You know, they thought like 5-10 years, where are we taking this? And oftentimes it goes off the rails, but we should be applying the same thing to that you might for, say, a robotics company that's trying to,
the scientific method.
Yes.
You know, with an eye on history, that's what we've observed. You make hypotheses based on historical data. We can look at history and learn. It's like we learn no lessons from history. We just keep doing the same shit over and over. I mean, maybe again, incrementally, lessons,
yes.
But
clearly
we're definitely
go back to
than
Pinker's better angels of our nature, or whatever the fuck it's called. That if you look at progress, you know, through history, we're definitely doing better than we ever were. That's one of the things that is difficult to reconcile. Like, you know, how many cell phones are in the world? I mean, even people who are in, you know, developing or third world, whatever you want to call them, countries, the majority of, I won't say majority, I don't know that for a fact, but like a growing number of people have access to information. I always saw that as like a great thing because, you know, people can record on the ground, say, government coups and things like that, you know, or
Arab Spring. A lot of it was because of this technology.
But now I'm more cynical because I'm glad you mentioned that. The Arab Spring's a great example. Look what happened in Egypt. It got hijacked by was it the something Brotherhood? No, I forget. But they just it gets corrupted too. You know, even those movements. Or another example that we're dealing with in a major way is like QAnon and shit, where the fact that everyone does have access to cell phones and the internet and everything, you know, you think it could be this promising, okay, now we all can access information. We can all make informed, you know.
Again, the internet is a tool. And if, you know, it gets misused, abused, you know, all the time, misinformation can be spread just as easily now, you know.
Right, exactly.
And sadly, misinformation is usually more appealing to people than the truth, you know.
And it's on each individual to check themselves and think, like, am I buying into this too readily because it fits this narrative that I, you know, tend to, you know, prefer, versus setting. I mean, a lot of it's noise too, you know, even all this stuff. It's just like, even the president itself is noise, you know, who's president. Like, if we all, I just know that if the entire world operated the same way I do, which is to be respectful towards other people, to put in your effort, that your best effort, to just basically not be a dick, as we have said before, just don't be a dick. If the entire world operated on that one principle, don't be a dick, we'd all be fine. But unfortunately, there's just too many motherfuckers out there that just don't operate on that rule.
No, that goes back to that ego shit again.
And that's where we arrive back at. You need
the whole ego is someone's going to be a dick to me. I better be a dick first. you know, which is understandable because it's just how do you break that cycle? It's ingrained in us because it's a truism. People are going to fuck with you. So you got to become a piece of shit and steel yourself against it and preemptively attack sometimes so that you don't get attacked. So it's just how do we get everyone to settle down? Mushrooms, dude. Mushrooms.
Seriously.
just everyone microdose, psilocybin, all that kind of existential fear can go away a little bit. We can all act a little more reasonably and shit.
It should be like a rite of passage because actually, there's been evidence and studies that have shown that, I don't know about psilocybin, but marijuana, if you consume it at too young an age, it can fuck your brain up.
Right.
At an adolescent age. So I'm just thinking like as a rite of passage into adulthood, because with psilocybin, I mentioned that no gas, no brakes guy who does like these sort of like what Greg Zard's doing, just goes to like, he went to Sturgis too, you know,
right,
and use sort of Socratic method, but in a very comedic way, will interview people. Well, I mentioned I saw a documentary recently with just talking about his whole process, which basically he just is in an RV, just traveling the country, just, you know, recording people and stuff.
Tom Green?
But no, this is I forget his name, but
that's what Tom Green's doing too, which is awesome.
Yeah, he is too. Yeah, I don't know if he's he's interviewing people, but not the same way. Like
it's not like
but this I wish I knew his name, but no gas, no brakes guy at one moment near the end of this documentary, was a Vice documentary. He said when he was 13, he did too many shrooms and has this, and he rattled off the acronym for the condition it is, where he sees like snow in his vision constantly. He said, even now while I'm talking to you, I just see this like static and shit. So, Jesus. And that's from shrooms, he said, at 13. So I'm developing this perspective that things like psilocybin and cannabis and everything are good when you're an adult, because it's a way to sort of reset yourself and you're
undo all the childhood shit.
Yeah, the hardwiring, right? Yes. But when you're an adolescent, you're still being hardwired. So you don't want to fuck with that natural process of, as you're still developing, just don't interfere with that. Just
here's the thing. If all the adults are doing mushrooms, we'd have less fucked up kids.
That's true too.
Because they wouldn't be abused and shit all the time.
Driven,
you know what I mean? So we don't need kids on mushrooms and stuff. No, they could just be wired better by being in a more loving environment, which mushrooms would create. But again, back to that dude with the snow vision and shit. That's like, again, abuse of a tool. Like you did.
Yeah,
too much,
he used it too much at a too young an age.
Just going hardcore with it.
Yeah,
pushing the limits.
He went overboard.
You're always going to get those people, but I think the more people you had microdosing and shit, the less limit pushing people would feel the need for.
And you know that, like, through human history, I mean, this puritanical shit is only recent. You know, earlier in history, we would, more of a paganistic type of time, we would use this shit in ceremonies and it didn't have this taboo. It's only recently that we started to crack down on that stuff, and so we've probably, in other words, it's sort of a void in our being, our ability to function as, emotionally and such, that we've deprived ourselves of these things that throughout history humans have probably been fucking, who cares, you smoke some weed or whatever. I mean, we know the shit existed.
Puritanical shit is purely just another mechanism for control and shit. It's censorship. It's all stems from the same place. Anyone who tells you you can't do anything that doesn't victimize someone else, you tell them to suck your dick.
Yeah.
Even if you're a chick, G.I. Jane did it. It's one of the fucking dopest movie moments ever. If you're a chick, say suck my dick.
Suck my dick. That was great.
It's ridiculous.
Was it in Death of Stalin when they wanted to recreate the picture of Stalin with the young girl, when from years before? So they were like, go find the young girl and we'll take another picture, with the new figure of power. And first they couldn't find her, so they brought three or four other candidates, and we couldn't find her, so how about one of these? And they're like, no, it needs to be the original girl, Malenkov, Jeffrey Tambor's character, and he's going to be taken he's going to be in the picture with the girl from the Stalin picture to show continuity, you know, in the regimes. And then they finally found the original girl, and they're like, whoa, she's way too like tall and old and, you know, like relatively. So, you know, yeah, let's go back to one of these other girls that really isn't her.
Yes.
And that was just one
the whole thing is just scrambling.
Yes.
And there's always
it's
great
like
comedy and scrambling. It's like if somebody's trying to hide a body, they murdered someone. They're trying to hide a body. You can make that funny as hell. I actually had a buddy last night who was watching Jack, and he was messaging me as he watched it. Our film, Cactus Jack, by the way, trailer plays at the end of this. Go to www.cactusjackfilm.com. You can buy it. Anyway, he was talking about how funny it was. And I was like, you were only the second person who has mentioned the humor, which I appreciate. Here's the thing. I'm of the opinion that things can be both hideous and hilarious at the same time. That's what Death of Stalin is. It's hideous and hilarious at the same time. Our shit is way more offensive in doing it. But Jack is a funny guy. He's a shit talker. He's funny in that shit talking at the corner of the bar kind of way. You know what I mean? He's a troll, and trolling.
It's better to laugh at it in a way. You know? Man Bites Dog gets referenced a lot.
Yes.
When people, you know, in reviews of Jack and stuff, and it was like that too. It dealt with even worse things than what Jack was doing in some ways. I mean, he was, again, it's the like literal violence versus verbal.
Exactly.
Man Bites Dog, he multiply killed many people, and many of them were like immigrants and things like that. Those were some of his favorite fucking victims and shit.
Exactly.
But it was handled in this black comedy manner. I see Jack that way too. Yeah, that it's like
he's doing the same shit. It's just verbal.
Yeah,
he's verbally slaughtering people in funny and fucked up ways. You know what I mean?
And in a way,
innocent people.
To view it as a comedic thing it sort of takes the teeth out of it. You know what I mean? Like it's a great way to handle people like that, is to laugh at them, you know, versus escalating to your own form of violence, which just is a cycle of, you know, perpetuating cycle of violence. Whereas we just laughed them back into the basement, you know?
Well, and this dude said, he's like, don't get me wrong, it's still scary as hell and creepy as hell, but it's also hilarious. And I said, mission accomplished, because most films don't get you to feel shit, let alone multiple things going on at once. I'm feeling horrified and I can't help but laugh and shit. That to me, target hit, dude.
So Jay and I are about to get on after this with a German podcast or film reviewer. Is that live? Do you know?
I don't think so. I think it's recorded. It's just a Zoom. I don't know if Zoom can even do live.
But yeah, like I don't know how much more there is. I think you're right about the double feature, which I agree. Actually, that was my instinct too. And we were doing that with Cinephiliacs, for us to each pick a movie for the next week.
Yeah, because there's not much you can really say about Death of Stalin. It gets you to start talking about all these other things, which is awesome. But it's like, you know, if you hit a little lull in it or whatever,
then we can jump on the next one, and maybe even you only talk about it for 5 minutes. But
we could also have guests on these, which would always, you definitely get extra 10 minutes out of having a guest.
Yeah.
You know?
It would require that they watch the same two films, or one film.
No, I'm saying do one film with a guest.
Make it one film. Yeah, so that's fair. We can just say, who wants to watch fucking Death of Stalin?
Who wants to watch The Mission and bullshit with us about it next week?
I'm down for any of that, man. That sounds fun.
So, and it could be the same person for a double feature. They could do 2 episodes.
That's true too,
or whatever. Yeah. But I don't know. It's fun to mix it up too.
But I think some of the shit we got into in this one is pretty great. I mean, that the fact that we deviated is better than talking about the film itself. And so, you know,
well, that's really, again, the function of film. It's to get you talking about shit in the world and considering the world and everything. It's not to sit there and just keep masturbatorily talking about it over and over. It's like, I don't want my film to be worshipped. I want people to use it as a springboard to have real discussions.
I could be mistaken
after they worship.
I could be mistaken on this, but Beria, you know, the sort of antagonist of the movie.
Yeah, speak on some of this shit you were talking about with him.
Well, it's been a long time, but you know, for a period, I kind of got obsessed with somewhat. I mean, you know, with everything else going on, but still, you know,
not like obsessed.
Yeah, that's not the right word, but just, you know, fascinated, I guess I'll say, with that period, you know, of upheaval in Russia. And Beria himself, I'm pretty sure, was directly responsible for killing his predecessor. who also was his like trainer, his mentor. You know what I mean? So that alone is, which they didn't get into this at all, which I totally understand. It's not even relevant to it.
Right.
But
if it was a novel, you would have mentioned it.
Yes, there was this repeating theme you see in history too, where that sort of happens, where like it's almost like some Sith shit with Star Wars. You know, the apprentice taking out his mentor and usurping him and stuff, and that's what happened with Beria. If I'm pretty sure this is all stripped from memory from shit from like years ago, but I often put myself in the head of the people who, like Beria's predecessor was very much like him, just this spy master, had operatives everywhere, all this kind of shit, and to end up in a prison cell himself, you know, from the same system that he abused, and to know his end's coming, you know, it's just, there's this repeating sort of theme of, you know, the dark side of the human condition, where that tends to happen. And it's like most people this goes back to like the whole denial of death Ernest Becker thing, where it's like everyone's operating in a way as if they feel like they're immortal. There's no, they're not, you know, like these guys that by the end they end up paying penance for. Oh shit, I thought that was the buzzer.
It's not, sorry. I was making sure my sound was up for the buzzer when it comes, but
yeah, anyway, in other words, it's just some Game of Thrones shit, man. Yes.
Sorry, goddamn, that just took it all off. Yeah, but it goes back to this whole deep state KGB CIA shit we're talking about. To even have
which
that,
Putin himself
imagine
from.
Think of a family, like we made the equation earlier to like stepdad, or you could take like Great Santini, shit like that. These authoritarian situations in a family. It's just extrapolated to a bigger scale with these countries and everything. But then imagine this component of all the secrecy in the family. That's the worst families, where it's like all this molestation going on, and plus outward physical abuse and shit. But then there's this layer of other nasty shit that no one talks about, and inbreeding and whatever fucking kind of wicked, crazy, creepy shit's going on,
which was often probably the norm through history. You know,
probably.
We're only now, like, you know, they called it the Dark Ages, you know, this period, which primarily had to do with history being not very well documented from that time, thus dark, you know.
Right.
But in the sense that most people interpret the Dark Ages being, you know, when we were more ignorant, and, you know, the Inquisitions and such occurred, and that may have even been prior, the Dark Ages, technically, the way it's described. But I feel like we're still in the hopefully final stage of a huge dark age. We still haven't quite emerged. Maybe we never will, which is,
I think we're like definitely still in it, but maybe if you squint, you could see the light on the horizon, kind of shit.
I mean, there's always just going to be just people are fucking crazy, man.
Definitely like better though. We're not burning astronomers at the stake and shit.
Right.
We're definitely
exactly. That's
trending in the right
direction.
Yes. Like,
I was looking at Beria's Wikipedia page to see if I could find that shit I was talking about his predecessor, but I haven't found that yet. But I just saw randomly a paragraph saying, abroad, Beria had met with Kim Il-sung, the future leader of North Korea, several times when the Soviet troops had declared war on Japan and occupied the northern half of Korea. So Beria met with Kim Il-sung before he had power. Which I'm sure had to do with them becoming communists, essentially.
Someone should do a show. We talked before about doing an Axis and Allies show where it would show both the halls of power and people on the ground and shit. But I do think, what if you just made like a straight up soap opera, the halls of power type thing of history throughout history? Like,
yes,
just because the small people really are the pawns, unfortunately. We very rarely, I mean, every once in a while somebody will start
there are plenty of
world war by
level
assassinating someone and shit, but
fascinating.
But I'm just saying, just how history is really wrought by these people, you know, these assholes.
The Game of Thrones side of it.
I don't know if anyone's ever done it. Surely, I mean, it doesn't even have to be dramatized. Just a documentary series.
I would love to do a that would be great too. But also, I was talking about the Book of Earth. You know, URTH which is, you know, essentially a goddess of fate. You know, and to do it as if it were like a fantasy epic, sweeping like chronology of horses, fucking regimes, and, you know, dynasties and all the shit. But to do it in this fashion that it's sort of this fantasy vibe, mode, but to make it all legit. Like, in other words, none of it can be, it has to be from real world history.
But they're like liches and shit.
No. I'm saying it's the real history of the world as if told by this fucking, you know, chronicle or whatever, this fantasy chronicle. Because there's so much shit in the world, like the Night of the Long Knives and the Hall of Mirrors. And I mean, it goes on and on. All the shit with Genghis Khan and all this. Like, if you were to just
basically
tell
everything
the whole
Dan Carlin
history,
talks about.
yeah, pretty much. This entire world history.
You're alone, right?
Yeah. Is it cool if I start filming now?
No, what are we getting inside?
Why are you here?
I just thought it was really interesting, you know, that someone hasn't left their basement in 6 months, not even to use the bathroom. Is that true?
Why would I want to go out there? I got everything I need right here. That's what's wrong with most people. They're weak-willed pussies and parasites who buy into that whole "it takes a village" bullshit. You know how many aliases I've used calling into radio shows?
I've had it up to my goddamn gills with the systematic feminization of this country.
I don't think importantly one, Jeff. Get your own damn show if you think you got that much to say.
You live in your mom's basement.
No! Fuck you! What's so special about my loser son?
You really do hate your own mother.
She's a woman. Why wouldn't I?
You know, there's some disconnect there, and if I could find it, what is hate? Where does it come from? Where does it go?
You want to know what gender you are? Reach down the front of your fucking pants and chew fucking kite. Black Lives Matter. Do you call horses slaves? Liberal fucktard. Enough with the parades and the rainbow flags.
Dude, this guy's... it's like pure hate, man.
I want to see something really fucking cool.
This guy is a fucking animal. He's got himself on a leash. He's itching to get off that fucking leash. And he's gonna fucking kill some people.
What a fucking show.
Stop!
What do we hear?
Look at me! Look at me!
You're gonna help me show him the light. We're gonna change the world.
This is Cactus Jack coming to you live from a studio audience.
To the man who calls himself Cactus Jack, we have watched as you have rocketed to infamy.
And you wonder why these cornered animals lash out. Pick a fucking side.
And now, we have watched as you have called for literal blood.
I know you're out there listening. It's buzzing in your ears, burrowing into your brain.
Do it.
Jack, you're gonna love this.
I pulled that trigger on that motherfucker's head.
Your VPN will not shield you. The darknet will not hide you. You and your kind are finished.
You think I'm scared of you?
Come and fucking get me.
Might I be your neighbor? Neighbor?